Good evening. My name's Ken Levy. I put together this presentation after I visited Antarctica back beginning of this year, between February 21st and March 2nd. That was summertime down there. Remember, it's south of the equator, so the seasons are opposite from what we have up here. And this was basically a bucket list trip for me. When I started out my career in my 20s, I was working for a large international firm, and they shipped me all around the world and so on. By the age of 35, 40, I had visited 5 continents. I was missing 2, South America and Antarctica. And I was stuck there. I didn't reach those last 2 till I reached the age of 69 back in February. So anyway, what I'm going to do in this presentation is give you information, very little bit about the history of Antarctic exploration, quite a bit about the logistics of getting down there, how you visit Antarctica. I have slides that show you what it looks like when you're visiting down there, especially the Antarctic Peninsula. And also, I have some references at the end if you want to follow up and learn more about Antarctica. So I do want to give just a brief shout out. I used a travel agency here. They actually organized the trip that I was on. They had 50 people from the Kansas City area that all went down there on the same ship. It's Cruise Holidays of Kansas City. They're located up north of the river. And the ship I went on is run by Atlas Ocean Voyages Cruise Line. And the ship I was on was the World Navigator. This isn't a plug, okay? This isn't like I'm not going to sell you a timeshare here. So I just wanted to give you that information in case you want to follow up later. If you want to talk more about them, I'll be happy to after the end of the presentation. Okay, I said I'd do just a tiny bit about the history of Antarctic exploration, okay? I just have one slide, so I told you I'd be brief on it. There was a lot of Antarctica was discovered basically back in the 1800s and so on. And then it really launched a lot of whaling activity down there. The waters around Antarctica are very, very rich, okay? And so there are a lot of whales down there. Back in the late 18th, 19th century, they were doing whaling to get whale oil for lamps and for lubrication and so on. And that led to eventually people desiring to actually get to the South Pole. Okay, it was kind of like the great white whale. Okay, first attempt to reach the pole was made by Shackleton. This was in 1907 through 1909. He started out in the bottom of the picture there, and he followed the red line up to almost to the pole, or I'm sorry, the black line. He got within 112 miles of the pole before he turned back. Okay, so he didn't quite make it all the way to the pole. The first successful reaching of the South Pole was Amundsen in his expedition in 1911 through 1912. Okay, and he was in a race back then against Scott, okay, who Amundsen was representing Norway, Scott was representing the UK. Amundsen successfully reached the pole in December of 1911, and 14 days later, Scott arrived at the pole as well, only to discover that Shackleton or that Amundsen had reached it before him. So he didn't get the bragging rights for that. Amundsen successfully came back and so on, later did some other exploration. Scott was not so lucky. He actually failed. They were within about 11 miles of one of their caches of food and supplies, and they were caught in a storm and they perished on the ice. Okay, so that was not quite an ideal one. The next thing was Shackleton, who realized that he was not going to be the first now. So his alternative was, well, I'll be the first to cross the entire continent. So he was going to go from the Weddell Sea over on the north side, the wide area there, okay, down to the South Pole, and then emerge out the bottom of the picture there on the Ross Ice Shelf. Okay, the problem is that he and his ship got stuck in the ice in the Weddell Sea there, up on the north side there. And that ship eventually was caught in the ice for 6 months. Eventually, the ice crushed it and sank. Okay, they used their ship's boats and so on. They had 3 boats, and they went up to Elephant Island, which is up here at the end of this archipelago of islands. I'm sorry for the people on the Zoom conference, can't see that well. But he then went out, left most of the crew there on Elephant Island, which is very seldomly visited, and he made his way all the way to South Georgia Island across some of the roughest waves and winds in the world. And from there, he launched a rescue to mission to actually launched 4 rescue missions to try to rescue his people on Elephant Island. They all survived, okay, which was good. There was a second ship that was coming from the opposite side that was going to lay in caches of food and so on, okay? They were coming up from the bottom of the picture there towards the pole, and that one was successful, and that crew made it back just fine. Might know the name Sir Edmund Hillary, okay? First man to summit the Mount Everest and so on. Hillary led that expedition on the other side. Okay, the first to cross the pole by air was Richard Byrd, U.S. Navy Admiral, later to be Admiral. He did it in 1929. The first one to successfully do a cross-continent trip was Fuchs in 1957, 1958. He had the advantage of he had airplanes dropping supplies to him along his way. Okay, so he actually made it all the way across. The first permanent South Pole station, permanent habitation there, was built in 1955 and 1956 by U.S. Navy Seabees, and they were leaving out of what is now McMurdo Station at the bottom there in the white area at the corner there where all those lines come together. And interestingly enough, the project to build that first South Pole station was run by Admiral Byrd. Okay, so he had a long history with the pole. So enough history. 2 types of visitors to Antarctica today. Number one is researchers. It's a pristine environment for doing all kinds of research, atmospheric, astronomical, about the animal life in the area. There are research bases scattered all around the continent. All these little red dots you see in the picture on the right are basically research stations. Now, there are very, 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 very few that are manned year-round, permanently manned. South Pole Station is one. The McMurdo Sound, which is the largest station in Antarctica, run by the U.S. Navy, is the second one. Third one is the Vostok Station, run by Russia, and it's the South Pole Station is right here, kind of in the middle here, and McMurdo is down here, and Vostok is here. Vostok is a place in the world that has had the coldest temperatures, okay, verified, minus 129 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty cold there. Next, the problem with getting there as a tourist, it can be done, okay? I'm living proof of that, okay? The problem is there are no hotels in Antarctica. There are no port facilities, okay? So the ships can't dock at a nice pier and then have everybody get off and, you know, roam around all the little boutiques and hotels and restaurants on shore and come back to the ship and so on. There are very limited airstrips. I'll show you a picture of one of them. So most people that visit Antarctica as a tourist today go on board ship. Okay, I first got interested in this. Does anybody know what was happening in Kansas City in August of 2017? Okay, you'll probably realize it when I tell you. It's when we had the complete eclipse of the sun. Okay, and I ran a program for my dad's retirement community and so on, and had people all get together to view the totality when the sun is fully covered up. And in the last 30 minutes, it clouded over, so we couldn't see it. that got me interested in, well, where can I see another eclipse? Okay. And I found out there was going to be an eclipse off of Antarctica. Okay. I figured, if you go down there on a ship, it can move away from where the clouds are and so on. Okay. That eclipse was back in 2021. Unfortunately, I did some research before I went down there, when I was preparing this for this trip. And I found a island that had a weather station that had been in operation for over 50 years. Okay. And for that month when the eclipse was going to occur, okay, it said that there is 18% chance of it being a clear day. Okay. So I figured I didn't want to be clouded out again, but it got me interested in, can I visit Antarctica anyway? Because I wanted to get to all 7 continents. Okay, so there are basically, when you get down that far south, you want to get as close as you can to Antarctica. Okay, so the places are tip of Africa here at Cape Town. You have at the tip of Australia over here, Hobart, which is on the Australian island of Tasmania. Christchurch, which is on the South Island of New Zealand. And then over here at the southern tip of South America at Ushuaia and Punta Arenas. Those are the places where tour operations go from. One thing to remember, that it's pretty far down there from Kansas City to the South Shetland Islands, which is the first thing that you reach in Antarctica, or the closest that you can. It's 7,277 miles. So it's a first schlep. Okay. Basically, touring Antarctica, like I said, there are no hotel facilities there. So people that go there generally go by sea, okay, or they're going on a ship, okay, which provides their hotel facilities. 90% arrive on the ocean, okay, and board the ship up at Ushuaia here in the southern tip of South America. They go across the Drake Passage here, and these are the first part of Antarctica that you reach. They're called the South Shetland Islands. So it'd be the equivalent of the Aleutian Islands off of Alaska. From there, you have the Antarctic Peninsula further on down, and if you can see the red track there, that's the track our ship took on the voyage. There are about 10% of the people go down there on a fly sail type of adventure. When people hear about going across the Drake Passage, which is this area between the southern tip of South America and the South Shetland Islands here, that is some of the roughest waters and heaviest winds anywhere in the world and so on. It's 555 miles across the Drake Passage there. And it takes 2 days to go down there and 2 days to go back. So, if you're subject to seasickness and so on, you load up on, there's scopolamine patches or Dramamine, so on. And some people want to avoid that. So what they do is they get a flight out of Punta Arenas over here and fly down to this island here. And you can see this is the plane they go down on. And you can see that it's on a gravel strip, okay? There's no paved runways down in Antarctica. Closest you come is to a paved runway is an ice runway. I'll get a picture of that. So most of the people that go down there, you can avoid the Drake Passage by flying across the Drake Passage, but it's a lot more expensive than just taking the ship across. So there are other ways of touring Antarctica. One is what I call the flyover tour. These go out of Australia and New Zealand. They're large jumbo jets. Basically, they leave from like Sydney or Christchurch, fly across the Drake Passage, spend a couple hours circling around Antarctica and so on, and then come back. What's interesting, it's about a 10-hour plus flight, but it's listed as a domestic flight. If you fly 10 hours out of here, you're in Europe, okay? But it's listed as a domestic flight because you land back at the same airport you took off from, okay? So you don't need a passport, surprisingly, for those. The other alternative is large 1,000 plus passenger cruise ships, okay? Now, there's an organization called IATO, International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. They're the ones that have to really bless any of the activities of tourists in Antarctica. They're controlled by the Antarctic Treaty and the organization that enforces that. That's the international treaty that controls all visitation to Antarctica. So one of the rules that IATO has is you cannot land more than 100 people at a time anywhere in Antarctica, okay, unless you're on a research trip. Okay, so these 1,000+ passenger cruise ships, they can sail down there across that rough Drake Passage and then just wave as they go by Antarctica, okay, and then come back across the Drake Passage. So not too conducive. There are all the other smaller ski-equipped planes that do a fly and land. Like I said, there are no real hotels there, so they don't spend a lot of time, and it's very expensive. Most of those fly out of Cape Town, South Africa. The ultimate, if you really want to do it, is a flight to the South Pole. Okay, first you get on one of these, private jets and so on. You fly over to the top part over here of, directly, here's Cape Town here, and you fly down to an ice runway here. This is the example of the ice runway. It takes 22 hours of grooming, okay, to prepare that ice runway for the planes to land. Okay, think about the world's biggest Zamboni, okay, grooming the ice. And then from there, they use smaller planes. These are actually old DC-3s that were built back, before World War II. Okay, this one has been re-engined with turbine engines and so on that can handle the cold better and so on. And then they spend some time on the in Antarctica, and you can see the little huts that they have there. But very expensive. If you want to do this, you really got to want to do it. They take 12 passengers per expedition. Each person is charged $98,500. So it ain't cheap. But you do get bragging rights getting to the South Pole. Okay, my trip to Antarctica that I picked, which was organized by the travel agency I went with, started out in Kansas City. First leg of it was fly down to Miami. That's about a 3+ hour flight. Had an 11-hour layover in Miami, then a 9-hour flight from Miami down to Buenos Aires. Okay, and you can see where Buenos Aires is on the map of South America. And then finally, you have about a 3.5-hour flight from Buenos Aires down to Ushuaia at the very bottom of South America. So it's a long schlep, okay? I learned the acronym PITA. Anybody know what that stands for? Pain in the So anyway, so like I said, part of this was my bucket list trip, okay? And so I needed continent 6 and 7, continent number 6 in South America. That's my whoopee moment in South America. And finally, continent number 7, Antarctica. And I was up at about 6:30 in the morning on deck there to get that photograph taken. That's up in the South Shetland Islands. Okay, I had done a lot of reading about exploration in that area and ships going around Cape Horn through those real rough things. And I saw a lot of different names and I got confused by them. I tried to put some of them together here. First one people may know is Patagonia. Patagonia is essentially the whole southern part of Argentina here. And it is really the area that is typified by mountains, okay, dominated by the Andes Mountains that extend down through the tip of South America. Further north in Argentina, you have the Pampas. That's like really western Kansas. A lot of grain growing regions and so on, a lot of cattle growing regions and so on. So when you hear Patagonia, think about rocks, mountains, so on. To get between the Atlantic Ocean on the east side and the Pacific Ocean, there are 3 ways. One, you can go around the bottom, around Cape Horn at the very southern tip. The other is through the Strait of Magellan, which is further up, or you can go across the Beagle Channel, which is where Ushuaia is located. You may have heard the word named Tierra del Fuego as well, land of fire. That's the island that Ushuaia is on and is basically on the right-hand side there. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the southern tip is like. You can see I took a picture of the Strait of Magellan as we're flying over it, and a picture of the Beagle Channel there. Okay, let's talk about Antarctica in terms of geography and climate. Number one, the Antarctic Peninsula, which sticks up, okay, is that little protrusion that comes up towards South America, okay, is actually an extension of the Andes, okay? And so it's very typical of what you find up in Norway and Iceland and Greenland, okay? Very mountainous areas, a lot of ice and so on. It is really not like the plains that you have up further in Argentina. The center of Antarctica, though, is relatively flat. When they talk about people going to the South Pole Station, they say it's like a vast wasteland, okay, a flat area all around it. The key is that that vast wasteland is up on top of a glacier that's about 2 miles thick, okay? So by the time you get down to the actual rock and so on, you're actually going to be underwater, okay, at that point, if you ever get all the way down there. So the South Pole Station and the whole interior is actually up on a high plateau. Give you an idea, anybody know how high Denver is? Call it Mile High City. It's at 5,280 feet elevation. You go there and some people have problems breathing and so on, okay, or can't exercise very much because, you know, the lack of oxygen in the air that high. South Pole Station is up at about 9,300 feet elevation. So people that go down there and so on, a lot of them suffer hypoxia and so on. Their blood oxygen level goes down, okay? Not for the faint of heart. Okay. Now, remember that the interior is covered basically by glaciers, very, very thick, and they extend down to the sea. And there's two areas, and that extension forms what they call ice shelves, okay? For those that are online and so on, the ice shelves are pictured in yellow here, okay? And so you can see over by the peninsula, you have the Ron ice shelf, and on the opposite side of Antarctica, you have the Ross ice shelf. They're scattered all around the coast. So there's over 600,000 square miles of these ice shelves. The ice shelves are, you know, like 2 miles thick, okay? So these are permanently occurring ice that's, instead of just rolling down, you know, the side of the hill, it goes into the water and so on, gets stuck there, and so forms a permanent ice shelf. Difference between that and what they call sea ice. Sea ice is a different thing. I'll get that to that in the next slide. One point of interest, though, is that ice shelves are where icebergs come from. They calve off of the ice shelves. One of the largest ones was an iceberg called A23A. So we're on the right-hand side there. It's as big as Greater London. It's about a third of the size of Hawaii's Big Island and about a third of the size of the island of Cyprus, okay? And that calved off of the Ron ice shelf up on the top there, the big yellow area at the top, and it got stuck there for 40 years. And about 2 years ago, it started migrating out to sea. Okay, I guess enough global warming so that it melted underneath it and so on. It had been grounded on the relatively shallow areas in the Weddell Sea. Now, difference between ice shelves and sea ice. Sea ice comes and goes, okay? During the Antarctic summer, the picture on the right there, you can see the extent of the ice that forms around it. You can see here on the top where the ice shelf was here, and then the white area here is the Weddell Sea, which is basically ice choked. Key is the predominant flow of the currents around Antarctica, as well as the winds, go in a clockwise direction, okay? And the Antarctic Peninsula there, the mountains there, protect the Weddell Sea from the warmer water during the summertime. So that ice really never melts, as well as you have the ice shelf on that side. Down at the bottom, you have the permanent ice shelf there. But what happens is in the summertime, the temperatures of the waters get up to about 35 degrees, okay? 35 degrees, the ice melts, and so the ice goes away. Come to the wintertime down there, it goes the opposite direction. And you can see in the picture on the left there what the winter maximum looks like. This is the average over the past, I think, 20 years or so. And you can see that basically the whole continent almost doubles in size due to that sea ice. Now, the sea ice is not that thick. It's only about 3 feet thick, but it makes it difficult for even a heavy-duty icebreaker to get down to the continent. In fact, you find that they don't go down there during the wintertime, okay? So people that go down there to winter over in Antarctica, they have skeleton crews that do that at South Pole Station, at Murdo Station, okay? But for instance, South Pole Station, there's 8.5 months where there are no flights in and out of it. It's too cold, okay? And the hydraulic fluid in the planes turns to mush, okay? And it stops the brakes from working. So that's interesting and so on, but just remember that seasonal variation in the ice and so on, okay, is very, very significant. Now, I was there in the summertime, okay, and it was like what we see on the right-hand side there. So along the Antarctic Peninsula, we had really good weather. Now, people think Antarctica, oh, it's just going to be too cold and so on. Not true. Remember, I was down there during the southern hemisphere summertime. When I arrived in Buenos Aires, okay, it was 90 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? Buenos Aires is about far south of the equator as Charleston, South Carolina is north. By the time we got down to the southern tip of South America at Ushuaia, we were seeing highs of about 48 degrees. That's about the area between Juneau, Alaska, and Vancouver, British Columbia, okay, halfway up, the bottom, getting to Alaska. By the time you get down to the South Shetland Islands, though, something interesting happens. Remember, I told you about that circular flow of water that goes round and round and round the continent, okay? As well as the winds follow that same pattern. There's nothing to interrupt them, okay? And so basically, the temperatures are moderated by that Southern Ocean current. The sea temp, while I was down there, averaged between 32 and 35 degrees. Because of those sea temperatures, it moderated the air temperatures, okay? Whole time we were down cruising around the Antarctic Peninsula, temperatures vary between 30 degrees and 40 degrees, okay? So if you want a point of comparison, if you go out to a Chiefs game during December up here and so on, that's about the average time for a shore excursion down there, okay? And so you spend an hour and a half, 2 hours at a Chiefs game, and that's what it's like. What we had out here, the temperatures is a little bit, it'll get down to those temperatures we have tonight that we had down in Antarctica. So it really isn't all that cold. It isn't like Vostok Station that I mentioned earlier. Okay. Like I say, most people that go down there go on ships. Ship I took was the World Navigator. It's a specially designed expedition luxury ship, okay? It's like a big cruise ship, okay, in terms that they cater to the passengers, the food's fantastic and so on. But there's some things that are different about it. Number one, big cruise ships have, thousands of passengers. This takes a maximum of 200 passengers. That's so they can land those people ashore, okay? 100 people at a time can go ashore according to IATA rules, okay? And so that means that they have two groups, an early group in the morning and a later group in the morning for a shore excursion, okay? And they do the same in the afternoon. They have the two groups, okay? But that's the reason why they limit it to 100 passengers. They also have a crew of 117. If you've ever done any large ship cruising and so on, that 117 to 200 passengers, that's a lot of crew, okay? And so that's a little bit different. It's an ice class ship, which means it has a reinforced hull. It can go through ice up to about maybe 6 to 9 inches thick and so on. But it's a very pointy bow, and what it does is it slices through it and pushes it to a side. So you have to have some water around you for that ice to escape. It's different from a true icebreaker, which is typified by a blunt bow. What happens with an icebreaker is they go as fast as they can, drive the ship actually up on top of the ice, and then the weight of the ship crunches down and crashes through the ice. Okay, so you're boom. back up, repeat. Okay. So if you're going very far in a true icebreaker and so on, it's not a very pleasant trip. This cruise line does gourmet dining, and they have an expedition staff, and doesn't have 16, 20 decks like big passenger cruise ships do. But inside, it's very similar to what you would expect from a cruise ship. The facilities here, the cabin has, queen size bed, every cabin has its own shower and toilet and so on, has its own little balcony and so on. Food was great. One difference is the picture with the green coats there. That's what they call the mud room. Essentially, you have to get down there and get dressed to go ashore, okay, for one of the expeditions. So you store all of the foul weather gear, the boots that they give you, the parkas and so on, are all kept down in the mud room. You go down, you get suited up, and then you board the Zodiac inflatable boats, and I'll show you a picture of those, okay, to do the shore excursion. Definitely not living rough. They have a spa on the ship, they have a swimming pool, they have a hot tub. It was really quite nice. Now, difference between an expedition cruise and a normal cruise ship. Traditional cruise ship has a captain, ship handling personnel and engineering personnel, hotel manager and housekeeping staff, cruise director and purser, dining room servers, bartenders, and a doctor. Expedition adds some other people, has an expedition leader, has Zodiac drivers. Zodiacs are those inflatable boats that they take you ashore on, the shore leaders and interpreters and so on, and the safety staff. One thing that this cruise line, and really all the cruise lines I know of down there, they very much emphasize safety. And so it was quite nice and very much appreciated. This was our expedition leader, Jonathan Zakaria. Each night they would do a recap briefing where they tell you what the plan was for the following day. This is one difference between normal cruise lines and so on. If you're going on a river cruise in Europe and so on, you know that today you're going to be in Budapest and tomorrow you're going to be in Vienna, and you're making your way up with scheduled stops and so on. Down there, you're going to stop and go to places depending on what the weather's like in those individual places. And so this is one picture they showed us where they were going to go that next day in the yellow track there. Going across the land in the ship is a little bit difficult, but that was kind of the joke of the day. Ship has an auditorium. Okay, most big cruise ships, have a big, theater, and they do floor shows and whatnot and so on. This ship has an auditorium, but they use it for briefings, lectures, and movies. They do an evening movie each day. They have briefings where some of them are mandatory about how to get in and out of the Zodiacs, doing parka and boot fitting and so on. And then they have lectures. You got 2 days going across the Drake Passage that you're not stopping each night. So they fill up the days with lectures. And you can see the variety of types of lectures that they gave. It's very interesting and very much appreciated by the passengers. Now, you're not going down there rough. You actually can stay connected on the internet down there, okay? I like this picture on the left, which is cruisemapper.com. It allows you to put in the name of your cruise ship, and it'll show you where the cruise ship is located. You see a little red circle there? That's where our cruise ship was located that day, okay? And you can see where the other cruise ships in the area are located. Windy app shows you what the winds and the waves are like. That area is the Drake Passage, that red area there. You're talking about winds of about 35 to 40 miles per hour. So it is pretty darn windy during that crossing. One hint that I really appreciated was I had a GPS app on my phone. What I would do is several times a day, I would take a screenshot of where our location was. That way, it would also give me the timestamp of where those coordinates were. And when I got home, I could take all the photographs I had taken, correlate them with timestamps, and figure out where I took each one of those. Because a lot of the things look alike, okay? But it's nice to know where they are. One interesting thing, also, you can get emails and texts. I have a good friend here that knows myself and my wife, and she can tell you that Nina is a Starbucks addict. Okay, I am known at the local Starbucks as the spousal retrieval unit, and I was getting the texts from Starbucks when her drink was ready to be picked up in Kansas City. Okay, down in Antarctica. I wasn't retrieving it for her that day. Okay, now I mentioned the Drake Passage. This is essentially a 550-mile stretch of ocean between the southern tip of Ushuaia, where Ushuaia and Cape Horn is, and the South Shetland Islands. It is some of the roughest seas in the world and so on. I was capturing what the forecast was on these days. Wind speeds were 25 to 35 miles per hour, gusts up to 45 miles per hour, as well as waves from 16 to 19 foot high. One of the things the ship had was a bow camera that was closed circuit TV copied to all the rooms. That was a picture I took of that screen and so on, going across the Drake Passage. You can see the water coming off. I apologize. The lower right-hand picture is actually a video, but we had problems getting the video to play right and to extend out to the people online here. But give you an idea, that lower right-hand picture is taken from the dining room, which is about 30 feet off of the water. And at the very top there, you can see the spray that has, hit that window. So Drake Passage lives up to its reputation as the Drake Shake. There are a few days out of the year when it's very calm and so on. They call it the Drake Lake. Okay, but when we did it both ways, it was the Drake Shake. First day in Antarctica. Like I said, I got up early that morning, okay, to get my picture taken, okay, at first view of Antarctica. So that was my whoopee moment, my seventh continent. They do allow you to go kayaking and so on. They take you on kayaking expeditions. See over on the right there where it says hikers, those tiny little dots there are actually people. You can see the scale of the mountains that, and that we're in around there. You can view just from your cabin. You have those beautiful views as well. And then we had a shore excursion that first day up in the South Shetland Islands. Penguins, first penguins. Everybody's anxious to see the penguins. Okay, the cruising areas. There's basically two areas that you cruise around. One is the South Shetland Islands, this set of islands up at the top here on the left, and then the Antarctic Peninsula, which is mostly solid but has a whole bunch of islands in it too. And so the first day we reached the South Shetland, we spent a day or so there before we went down to the peninsula, dinged around for about 5 days around the peninsula, came back up to the South Shetlands to what's called Deception Island, and I have a slide on that later, and then 2 days back across Drake Passage. For those that are here, I have a poster here that has some of these pictures on it, so you can see it in more detail. So cruising and activities, things that we did on the cruise, shore landings. We did 5 shore landings in the hull at 5 different locations. They did sea kayaking and paddling 3 times, camping and polar plunge. I'll get to that in a slide coming up. Zodiac cruising, some places don't have a spot where you can go ashore and land. One of them is a area around where the whaling factory ship, the Governor Orange, sank back in 1916. Still sticks up out of the water down there, but there's no landing site. And so you go out in the Zodiacs and essentially go around the ship. Ship cruising, one time at Deception Island, there are landing spots at Deception Island, but it was too rough that day. It was really, really windy. And then ship at sea, going across Drake Passage back and forth 2 times, up and back. Okay, the expeditions, shore landings. You do it aboard Zodiac inflatables. You see an example of us coming down the nice set of stairs, get you right down next to the inflatable boat, and you step over into the boat and so on. You can see what the inflatable looks like when it's empty up at the top there. And you notice all the passengers with the green parkas on. That's so they can tell the punters from the crew. Okay, so if one of the passengers wanders off and so on, they want them visible so they can go haul their backside back to the ship. And you can see the type of landings that we had there. There are really no nice, there's sandy beaches down in Antarctica. The only one is up in Deception Island. I'll point that out later. But most of them are just rock-strewn landing sites. You have to see other things in Antarctica. Icebergs, glaciers, the lower left-hand picture here, you see the blue ice there. That's the color of what ice is in a glacier. Okay, people think it's white. It's not, it's blue. Just the way the fraction works. Right-hand side there is the wreck of the whaling factory ship, the Governor I told you about that we sailed around. This was one of my wife's favorite pictures. She said I have a silly grin on my face, and yes, I do. Okay, this is one of the penguin rookeries that we visited. There's about 1,000 penguins at this rookery. You can see them, going ashore there onto the rocky beaches and so on. There are no trees for them to build nests out of and so on, so they make their nests out of rocks, little piles of rocks, and they tend to steal the rocks from each other. Okay, eventually they lay their eggs, and either the father or the mother will sit there incubating the eggs until they hatch. We were there at the end of the summer. Okay, basically the life cycle of the penguins is they come ashore in late October. Okay, they build their nests, lay their eggs, and the chicks are born basically around middle of December and so on. And then they grow, and finally, by the time about when we were there, the end of February, the chicks are almost full grown and so on. You can tell the ones that are full grown from the ones that are not. In the picture on the left here, if you look at the penguin on the right-hand side, you'll see little tufts coming off his back. Those are his baby feathers, okay? And he's doing what's called fledging. Flight-type birds here in the Northern Hemisphere, when they fledge is when they get their flying feathers. They fledge when they get their waterproof feathers. Up until the point that they get those feathers, they don't go in the ocean, okay? And so the chicks are all ashore and so on. Once they get their waterproof feathers, they can come down to the shore and start playing around. It was really funny that day to watch the baby penguins coming down and learning, how to swim and so on. Okay, it's like kids going out and playing in the snow up here. Other types of wildlife, whales. Second acronym, I gave you PETA before. The other one is FOMO, fear of missing out, okay? If you look at it, when a whale surfaces and so on, you might see its back for about 2 seconds, then its tail flukes come up for about another second, and that's it, okay? So if you're not there at the time, you've missed it. So fear of missing out. There are seals down there as well. We saw a number of them while we were down there. Also met a lot of people, a lot of new friends on the cruise. The couple here on the left came prepared. This was their 7th continent. They brought a banner, okay, heralding that. I became good friends with them. About 32% of the people that visit Antarctica as tourists come down from the United States, about 15% from China, 12% from Australia, 8% from the United Kingdom, other countries, 18%, so on. So out of the 145 passengers on our particular cruise, ship handles 200 at max. 50 of the people were from the Kansas City group that our travel agency had arranged. Okay, I apologize. This is the second picture I was going to show you. The one on the left here is a video, but we couldn't get it to play right, so the people seeing this from home could see it. This is what's called the polar plunge. This is an optional activity. 71 people on that cruise out of the 145 decided to do the polar plunge. Okay, now you might ask, did Ken do the polar plunge? Number one, the water temperature was around 35 degrees. I am not that stupid, okay? Secondly, okay, underneath these clothes, I'm pasty white, okay? And I'm a big guy, okay? So I could just visualize coming out of the polar plunge and so on. You just leap into the water and then they haul you back out. He's tied to a rope there. Okay, the guy that's going to jump in the water there. When I came out, I visualized that I'd be called Moby Dick for the remainder of the cruise. Okay, so the other alternative that you could do, that one you didn't have to pay anything extra for. On the right, though, if you wanted to go camping on the ice, you could spend one night ashore, okay, the whole night. 19 people out of the 145 decided to do that. They charge you 750 extra bucks to do that, okay? So I wasn't quite up to that. Number one, there are no convenient outhouses ashore, okay? Number two, there are no convenient trees to do your stuff because there aren't any outhouses behind, okay? You dig a hole in the snow, they line the bottom of it with a waterproof tarp, put your sleeping bag in there, and that's where you spend the night, okay? You come back the next day. Interestingly enough, there was one man that did camping on the ice that night, came back to the ship, went back ashore for the morning shore excursion. They did the polar plunge at lunchtime, and then went back ashore for the afternoon excursion. He was 82 years old, okay? The crew recognized his achievement there. The last day we spent in Antarctica was at Deception Island. This is one of the, I think, the most interesting places that we visited. It's called Deception Island. It was originally, when it was discovered back in the 1880s, they thought it was just another Rocky Mountain island and so on. Until a couple of years later, they discovered there was a narrow inlet here called Neptune's Bellows. You can see the inlet on the right-hand picture there that's going out to the open ocean. Okay, and basically this island is actually the caldera of an active volcano. The active part of the volcano is actually underwater. It's about where the O is in the middle, where it says Port Foster, the O in the word port. There's a couple of permanently or summertime manned research stations there, one an Argentinian one on the left-hand side over here, and a Spanish research station. Over in the upper right, there's a couple red dots that are kind of faint up here. Those used to be research stations. They were buried under an ashfall back in 1968, okay? And so evacuating. You notice there's a Whalers Bay down here around the entrance to the island. This is a very convenient protected area that the whalers could go into back in the 1800s and so on to get out of that heavy surf or heavy waves and so on. So it was very windy that day. They said we had gusts of 80 miles per hour as we were leaving through Neptune's Bellows. It tends to funnel the winds in through there, through the bellows. And that entrance is only about 4 times the width of the ship. So we had a pretty good captain. He had a lot of experience in waters down there. There were just a very few disappointments that we had on the trip, okay? One, we didn't get to see the Aurora Australis, which is the southern lights. You have Australia Borealis up in the northern hemisphere. It's Australis down there. We weren't far enough south and there wasn't enough solar activity while we were down there. We didn't get below the Antarctic Circle. I'll let you read about what the Antarctic Circle is. The key thing is at least one day out of the year, there's 24 hours of continuous daylight, and one day out of the year that there are 24 hours of continuous darkness, at least when you get down below the Antarctic Circle, south of there. We didn't get to see baby penguins. Okay, you can see pictures of penguins when they're first born. The chicks on the left-hand picture there, about midway through growing up, on the middle picture, and on the right, you see them when they're fledging and getting their permanent feathers and so on. We were there at the end of the season, so all of the penguins that we saw were maybe about 2.5, 3 feet tall and so on. Okay, cute as a button, but we didn't see any baby penguins. Those are even cuter. So we were just too late in the season. So there's some variability whether you come early in the season in November versus late in the season in February and March. And we did get as far south as Port Lockroy and the Penguin Post Office. Port Lockroy was actually a research station set up by the British Antarctic survey back in the 1940s and 1950s. Okay, they originally went down there to map all of the little islands and inlets down in the Antarctic Peninsula. Okay, the two buildings there that you can see in the upper left-hand photo and the lower right-hand photo were part of their living. That's, you know, the whole research station while they were down there doing all their mapping. I'm getting down. This is almost the last slide. Okay. They eventually finished that project early in the 50s. They abandoned the station. You know, stuff doesn't go away down there. Antarctica really doesn't get that much snow. They get about 5 inches of snow a year. Okay, it just blows around a lot. Okay, and will build up. But back in 1996, a group called the UK Antarctic Preservation Trust, okay, came down and refurbished the original research station, turned it into a museum for all the cruise ships coming down there, and also set up a post office, courtesy of the British government. So about 70,000 pieces of mail are postmarked going to over 100 countries out of the Penguin Post Office. There is a really good video called The Penguin Post Office that's available here at Mid-Continent Library. Recommend you check it out. It's a great program about it. Getting down to the end here, if you want to visit Antarctica, a couple things about the logistics. Number one, I use the services of a travel agency. I had a lot of experience with that travel agency. They were really great. They handled all the arrangements for the flights and for the cruise and so on. And more importantly, they also handled the arrangements for insurance. Get evacuated from Antarctica costs about $250,000, okay? There are not scheduled airlines, okay, to evacuate you out of there. And so the insurance is pretty much mandatory, okay, for that. Cruise line and ship, there's lots of options to choose from. Most of them are newly purpose-built expedition vessels like the one I went on and described. There's a variety of itineraries, length of trips, whether you visit some of the outer islands like St. George Island and the Falklands, and where you go in the peninsula, whether you go below the Antarctic Circle, and so different prices and so on. Cruising down there is relatively expensive for a couple of reasons. One is they don't carry that many passengers per ship. So you got to amortize the cost of the ship across a smaller passenger pool. Secondly, you have the additional cost of the expedition staff and also areas that can't be used on the ship that you would normally dedicate to revenue production, like the mudroom and the Zodiac storage, helipad. The ice class conditioning makes the hull a little bit because of the reinforcement. The other thing to realize is that air transportation, you're going a third of the way around the world to get down to, you know, Ushuaia, okay? And so it's a long flight or a long series of flights. So you might want to consider upgrading from coach to business class for that. I do have some references I want to tell you about, and Cheryl is going to be posting this on the library's website, so you can get these. Most of these are either available directly from the library, you can put them on hold and get them delivered to your local branch, or you can order them through MCPL's WorldCat capability. That's their interlibrary loan. The first one is available just from MCPL, Antarctica, Secrets of the Southern Continent, Antarctic Peninsula. I got Visitor's Guide that's done by the British Antarctic Survey. That I got through interlibrary loan. There's a Lonely Planet Guide that's available from the library. Lonely Planet, you know, typical travel guide that they have. Next one is interesting, Icebound by Jerry Nielsen. She is the doctor for the South Pole Station that was wintering over there back in 1998 and 1999. And for 8.5 months, okay, at the South Pole, they do not fly in and out. It's just too cold. Okay, so people that stay down there, and there's a skeleton crew of about 15 to 20 people that winter over there, they're stuck down there for that time period. She found she had a lump in her breast after the last flight went out. Okay, and she did a biopsy on herself with the assistance of one of the other people down there, found out it was cancerous and so on. They launched a recovery expedition or flight for 2 weeks earlier than normal. That flight that came in is 60 degrees below zero. It's just on the tolerance level for, capabilities of the aircraft. Fascinating story because she tells a lot about what it's actually like to live at the South Pole. Endurance is about Shackleton's failed expedition. Really great book. That's available through MCPL. The Race to the South Pole is about the race between Amundsen and Scott to be the first to reach the South Pole. And finally, The Ship Beneath the Ice is about what happened in 2022. Last year, they actually discovered the sunken Endurance, which was Shackleton's ship, is I think like 9,000 feet deep. Okay, so not quite as steep as the Titanic, but you couldn't go down and visit it and so on. It was all through remote submersibles. Some videos. One I mentioned earlier, Penguin Post Office. It's really great. It tells you about what it's like manning that post office. They only do it during the Antarctic summer. It is about half about manning the post office and half about the penguins that live there. Be prepared. Penguins are a bit rough because not all the penguins survive. So they go into the detail on that. What is interesting, though, is the Penguin Post Office is run by the UK Antarctic Preservation Trust. And the people that run the post office, there are 4 people that spend the summer down there running the post office, and they're all women. Okay. And so they talk about the women that man the Penguin Post Office in that movie. Next one, Maiden, is actually about a 53-foot sailboat that participated in the 1989 round the world sailboat race. It had an all-women crew. And what's fascinating about it, it has some of the most dramatic pictures of crossing the Drake Passage. It'll scare the bejesus out of you. Now, they're on a small 53-foot boat. We're on I think 600, 700-foot long ship, okay? And we were high up out of the water and so on. They were getting sprayed all the time on that. So it's an interesting video. Last one, I'll let you look on the others, but the Antarctic A Year on Ice is available through the library here. It was actually filmed over a period of about 10 years, mostly at Myrtle Station out on the Ross Ice Shelf on the east side of Antarctica. But it is an amazing collection of time lapses of what it's like living in McMurdo and so on. Highly recommended. That's about it. Last thing. Internet has a lot of resources if you want to find out about cruises down there, itineraries, costs, and so on. You can use the internet, look up any one of these names, or just do a search on Antarctic cruises and so on. And these are some of the more popular ones. There's also a lot of stuff about research that's done down there. The United States has a very active program, National Science Foundation program, at the website usap.gov. British Antarctic Survey, bas.ac.uk, has a lot of stuff on the research they do. Other sources, Google, Wikipedia. One of the things I was doing down there was Wikipedia searches. When they announced where we were going that day, I would check out Wikipedia to see what the island was and what it was like and so on that we were visiting each day. The Antarctic Heritage Trust has a website too. They're the ones that run the Penguin Post Office. There is another one I don't have up here. Oh, yes, I do. The hyperlink up at the top. Cruisecritic.com has a lot of information about cruising down there. Yes.
Can you address the conditions of what the state of the ice is down in Antarctica?
When we were there, we were basically going, because we were there in the summertime, okay, all the sea ice is melted off on the west side of the Antarctic Peninsula where we were cruising and so on. So it's like basically open ocean cruising, well, protected water cruising if you go up to Alaska and the little islands up there.
But I know Nelson,
Mhm.
but that there have been a lot of breaks in the ice, and it's been calving off in large numbers, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, most of those occurred over in the Weddell Sea, where on the side that's shadowed from the main currents and so on, where it's all this ice choked and so on, along the Ron ice shelf and so on. So what you're thinking about there, most of those icebergs and big icebergs and so on occur over on that side. We didn't cruise over on that side of the Antarctic Peninsula. We were over on the open ocean side of it. Okay, that freeze up in the summertime down there. It's just difference where the ice is. The ships I was on, and most of the cruise ships that go down there carrying passengers and so on, do not go in amongst the ice if they can avoid it. Okay, or not into the heavy ice that you have like in the Weddell Sea or on the ice shelves. They aren't built to. They aren't true icebreakers. Okay, and so they can't handle it. Did I answer your question?
No, I know it's a big concern.
Mhm.
I wondered if these trips down there, if they're addressing it with the tourists that are going down there.
Safety. I will tell you, the only one that I know of, one of the first purpose-built expedition ships was the MS Explorer. It was built by a guy by the name of Lindblad. It was launched in 1969. Okay, and it's the only one passenger cruise ship that has sunk down there. It sank in 2007. Everybody survived. Okay, so no loss of life and so on. That's the only one that I know of that actually has had that type of accident. Okay, it actually hit an iceberg. They did a Titanic move. So let me, Cheryl, are there any questions that have come up from any of the people online? Okay, that's the last slide that I had. I have a poster up here that shows some of the pictures and detail that I showed in the slides. I also have a map here that shows the southern tip of South America as well as the Antarctic Peninsula. And for those that are interested, I also have some sheets here that list the resources, okay, that I mentioned earlier. And Cheryl says we're probably going to be able to get that.
No, we've got one question here.
Sure.
Were you or your wife sick from the water crossing, and or are you normally ill with water travel?
Okay. Direct quote from my wife: I don't do cold and I don't do wet. Okay. So she didn't join me on this trip. She said, Ken, if you want to do this, I know this is your dream. Okay. Go ahead and do it all by yourself. Okay. So she didn't go. I have sailed a lot. Okay. Both on big cruise ships as well as on small sailboats and so on, 40-foot sailboats and so on. I generally do not get seasick, but I prepared for the trip. I got the patches that you put behind your ear that have scopolamine in it and is a good anti-seasickness. I wore it, for the 2 days crossing the Drake Passage. They do have a small little boutique on the ship. They sell the little stuffed penguins like I have here over on the left. Okay. They sell lots of anti-seasickness medications and so on, and gloves and scarves and so on, but not like your typical cruise ship, boutique. So, okay, they're meeting the needs of the people and the passengers and so on. And they have an onboard doctor that will prescribe you, anti-seasickness medications. I didn't get seasick while I was down there. One of the pictures I was showing Cheryl earlier, this ship is built to handle the rough weather. Okay, it has stabilizers that wing out and so on that prevent the rolling so much and so on. The video that I didn't get to show, you can look at where all the waves were going up and down past the window, 30 feet off the surface of the ocean. Okay, and basically the horizon was pretty rock steady. Okay, so the ship wasn't rolling a lot. Okay, but they do have, different from most cruise ships, they do have railings in all the interior corridors, down past all of the cabins and so on. I was coming back from lunch one day, and the housekeeping staff was out servicing the cabins and so on. And I noticed they had one of their standard carts, just like you find in any hotel and so on. Okay. And it was lashed to the railing with a rope. Okay. Because we were going across the Drake Passage, and there's still, occasionally you get a little bit of rocking motion and so on. So it wasn't as bad as I expected. I was glad to have the Drake Shake experience. Okay, I've never been in that rough of waters before and so on. I had read a lot about it, seen videos about what it was like in the Drake Passage, grounding Cape Horn and so on. And so I was prepped for it. I knew what was coming. I got the patch, before I left here, and so. It's manageable. I don't know too many of the other people that got seasick. It's 2 days, so you can spend the time in your cabin, so it wasn't too bad. Any other questions, Cheryl?
Not yet.
Okay. That's all I have. Yeah.
Do you stay in touch with anybody you met while you're on the cruise?
The couple from India. Okay, and there's one or two people that were from the Kansas City group that I stayed in contact with. One of them, interestingly enough, okay, was missing a foot. Okay, she has an artificial foot. She went on the cruise. Okay, and I don't know if she did all of the shore excursions and so on. She might have cherry picked those and so on, but you sign up for it in advance, and but I'm writing a novel. My wife rolls her eyes at that. I've been working on it for about 35 years. Okay. And so one of the characters is missing a foot in that. So I had some interesting discussions with her about that character for my novel. So anyway, I want to thank all those people that have come in person. And I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about Antarctica. I wish I had an introduction like this before I went down. I would have gotten a lot more out of it. So did a lot of the research after I got back. I'd like to thank Nick Shepard, who works for the library here in the program department, and from MCPL headquarters, Cheryl
Pemberton.
There you go. Okay. Who's here because they're streaming this online tonight as well for the presentation. So I'll be happy to stick around if you like, answer any questions you might have, additional questions you might have, or if you want to just chat about it and so on, I'd be more than happy to do it. Thank you very much.